Hello and welcome to News Central TV. My name is Mazino Appeal. Here are stories making headlines beyond the continent. We begin with the situation in the Middle East, where Greek Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis has joined world leaders in welcoming the ceasefire agreement between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, which took effect on Wednesday morning. Speaking at a press conference during the second intergovernmental summit between Greece and Cyprus in Nicosia, Mitsotakis expressed optimism that a similar truce could soon be achieved in the Gaza Strip. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden and French President Emmanuel Macron, in statements ahead of the ceasefire, highlighted its significance. They emphasized that the truce would protect Israel from the threat posed by the Iran-backed Hezbollah and pave the way for a lasting calm in the region.
Θέλω να εκφράσω την ικανοποίησή μας για το γεγονός ότι φαίνεται να έχει επιτευχθεί μια εκεχηρία η οποία αφορά τις εχθροπραξίες στον Νότιο Λίβανο. Ελλάδα, Κύπρος και Ελλάδα αγωνίστηκαν και αγωνίζονται πάντα ώστε η κρίση που εξέσπασε πριν από ένα χρόνο να μην πάρει τα χαρακτηριστικά μιας περιφερειακής ανάφλεξης και νομίζω ότι αυτή η εξέλιξη είναι μια εξέλιξη ιδιαίτερα θετική και εύχομαι και ελπίζω και πολύ σύντομα να έχουμε μια αντίστοιχη εκεχηρία και στη λωρίδα της.
Still on the Israeli-Hezbollah truce, United Kingdom's Prime Minister Keir Starmer says the recent ceasefire in Lebanon must be used as an opportunity to build trust, de-escalate tension, and push for a wider ceasefire. The ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah in Lebanon began a day after Israel carried out its most intense wave of airstrikes in Beirut since the start of the conflict, killing at least 42 people across the country.
Mr. Speaker, the ceasefire announced in Lebanon is long overdue, but demonstrates that diplomacy can succeed even in the most challenging of circumstances. We must seize this opportunity to build trust, de-escalate tensions, and push for a wider ceasefire. My position very, very clearly in relation to the sale of capability to Israel to defend itself against attacks such as those from Iran. And I'm very clear that we'll continue to do so. Obviously, there's a very important vote on Friday. But whichever way that vote goes, we must invest properly in care across our health service. And that's why, in addition to putting the NHS back on its feet, we're putting forward a 10-year plan to make sure the NHS can give the care that everybody would expect across the spectrum, including end-of-life care.
Here for people, everything he has done is attack people. The budget was an attack on farmers, an attack on workers, an attack on pensioners, an attack on the young, and an attack on thousands of charities and businesses across the country. The whole system is broken, Mr. Speaker, and he is making...
Hezbollah's political council deputy leader Mahmoud Houamati has announced that the group will uphold the ceasefire agreement, but only if Israel does the same. Speaking during a press tour in Beirut's southern suburbs as the truce took effect, Houamati cautioned that if Israel breaches the truce, Hezbollah will respond in kind.
البيئة كما كانت هي وفية سنكون نحن في المقاومة وفي قيادة المقاومة أوفياء لها. سنعيد إعمار الضاحية وسنعيد إعمار كل ما تهدم في كل لبنان وسوف نعمل على إيواء العوائل التي أصبحت بدون منازل وبدون بيوت. حول هذا الموضوع حول موضوع تطبيق الاتفاق وكما قلت نلتزم بقدر ما يلتزم العدو بقدر ما يلتزم العدو وإذا لم يلتزم فنحن أيضا لن نلتزم.
And for more on this, I'm joined by our international correspondent, Afia Hagen. Afia, good evening once again. Thanks for joining us. Now, if you'd tell us what the latest is on the ceasefire deal between Israel and Lebanon.
Well, this sort of fragile peace that is now existing between the southern parts of Lebanon and the northern parts of Israel is in place at the moment. So through the day, you've had thousands of people moving back towards that area in South Lebanon. But just before 5:30 p.m. local time, a curfew was imposed. And that curfew was imposed with only about 30 minutes notice given to people. It was given on social media, which meant that nobody who was already moving south towards southern Lebanon couldn't get in or couldn't get to the parts that they wanted to go. So that has caused some consternation in the region. Israel saying that it's reminding its people that there are still IDF troops in positions in accordance to the ceasefire, because you have this 60-day transition period in which Israeli soldiers and Hezbollah are going to pull out of that region, and when Lebanese troops are going to be the ones that are patrolling the area. So this is meant to be a permanent deal. This deal is supposed to be a long-lasting ceasefire like the one that was in place in 2006. That was in accordance with the UN Security Council Resolution 1701. Like I said, Lebanese troops are going to replace Hezbollah and Israeli troops to try and keep the peace, and they will be backed by the US and France and UN peacekeeping forces as well. And really, really fundamental to Israel was them keeping the right to respond to violations. That could be Hezbollah, rebuilding, reforming, getting its troops back together in place. And so they have in this ceasefire, the resolution that they can respond to any attacks, or if they see Hezbollah reforming, they can do something about that.
So let's talk about the ceasefire here. How confident are both sides that the truce will actually hold?
Well, I think we can be pretty confident that it is a fragile truce, right? It's a fragile peace at the moment, and it will break down somewhat perhaps on both sides, like it did in 2006, where there was a ceasefire. When we had that UN Security Council Resolution 1701, you still had sort of small skirmishes on either side. So we can expect that it will break down in part. And remember, there's the 60-day transition period, which we're in now, which will be almost 2 months. And I suppose in that time, we may see targets being hit, and we may see the armies still in place and still have the infrastructure there. It will really depend on the Lebanese army and how well they can keep the peace in that area. They will be supported primarily by France and the US. So it's a fragile peace. It's a fragile truce. We can expect it to break down a little bit, but I think it should hold. If in the Lebanese people especially want it to hold, and Israel does as well, but that's partly because they want to put their focus elsewhere.
So what does the cessation of hostilities mean for the actual situation in Gaza?
Well, President Joe Biden, the outgoing US president, has said that he's going to make a fresh push for there to be peace talks in Gaza, for there to be a cessation of hostilities there as well. But let's remember what Benjamin Netanyahu said yesterday in his speech, where he said that one of the reasons why the ceasefire is coming now is because he wants to give his troops a rest, and also because he wants to refocus. He wants to refocus the army on what they're doing and on that conflict in Gaza. He wants to refocus the troops there, make sure that that's where the resources are going. And yes, you have had Israel fighting with Lebanon and in Gaza, and skirmishes across the Syrian border as well. So it's an army that has been stretched. So whilst President Joe Biden says he would like there to be more talks, he would like for there to be a fresh push, at the end of the day, you have an Israel that is going to refocus its efforts in Gaza. So you may have two opposing views there.
Thank you very much, then, Afia. Thank you for joining us once again this evening. Now, let's also tell you that tens of thousands of Lebanese displaced by the war are now returning to their devastated towns and villages. Under the terms of the ceasefire agreement, the Lebanese military has begun reinforcing its presence in the country's south, a region long controlled by Hezbollah. The war escalated after nearly a year of cross-border fire sparked by Hezbollah support for its Palestinian ally Hamas. The conflict has had a devastating humanitarian impact, killing thousands of people in Lebanon and triggering mass displacements on both sides of the border. As refugees return home, many express anxiety about the uncertain future, saying they are ready to face the challenges ahead.
رجع على بيتي الحمد لله بيتي مش مدمر بس الأرض حول البيت كلها مزروعة قنابل عنقودية في عنا هلأ صار عدو خفي فينا نقول
أرض العز أرض الكرامة وأرض اللي كل أجر شاب من هالشباب دعست عليها فيها كرامة فيها عز ومشاعري كتير حلوة إنه من بعد هيك سنة وأنا من أول الحرب يعني أنا من حولة فمن بعد هيك سنة ومن بعد عذاب بدي أرجع وإن شاء الله كله رح يصير
على لبنان على ضيعتنا لنشوف بيوتنا شيء.
We'll go on a short break now, and when we get back, Russia to expel 2 German journalists, a tit-for-tat response. We'll be back. Welcome back. Now, officials from Canada, Mexico, and China have warned U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's pledge to impose sweeping tariff on America's 3 largest trading partners could upend the economies of all 4 countries. Trump vowed to introduce 25% tariff on goods coming from Mexico and Canada and an additional 10% on goods coming from China. He said the duties were a bid to clamp down on drugs and illegal immigration. For News Central's international correspondent, Avi Hagen has more.
President-elect Donald Trump promised massive hikes in tariffs on goods coming from Mexico, Canada and China, starting on the first day of his administration, a policy that could sharply increase costs for American businesses and consumers. The move, Trump said, will be in retaliation for illegal immigration and crime and drugs coming across the border. On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders, Trump posted on his Truth Social platform. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Trump said America's neighbors can easily solve this long-simmering problem. Similarly, Trump said that China will face a higher tariff on its goods by 10% above any existing tariffs until it prevents the flow of illegal drugs into the United States. The president-elect claimed in the Post that Chinese officials promised him the country would execute drug dealers caught funneling drugs into the United States, but never followed through. Responding to Trump's announcement, Chinese embassy spokesperson Liu Pengyu said his country had been in communication with the US about counter-narcotics operations, and that the idea of China knowingly allowing fentanyl persecutors to flow into the United States runs completely counter to facts and reality. The punishing tariffs, if enacted, could wreak havoc on America's supply chains and industries relying on goods from the country's closest trading partners. Although investors believe the tariffs could ultimately strengthen the dollar, America's financial markets took a hit too. The extraordinary tariffs would raise costs dramatically for Americans for everyday goods that had previously come over the border without any import taxes. That stunning shift could stifle economic growth, especially if inflation-weary consumers spend less in the face of higher costs. For News Central, I'm
Now, Russia announced Wednesday that it will expel 2 journalists from Germany's ARD national network in a tit-for-tat response after a Russian broadcaster reported its journalists were ordered to leave Berlin. Speaking at a press briefing, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova said the move was necessary following Germany's actions. She identified the 2 ARD journalists as correspondent Frank Eichmann and cameraman Sven Feller, who must leave Moscow and surrender their accreditations. Zakharova added that Russia would consider accrediting new ARD correspondents only if Germany provides favorable conditions for Russian journalists and allows Channel One's Berlin bureau to fully resume operations. The expulsion comes amid ongoing tension with Russian state-controlled media facing bans and restrictions in the West since the Ukraine conflict began, accused of spreading disinformation. Moscow has responded with what it described as reciprocal measures.
На запрет властей ФРГ на пребывание и работу корреспондентов Первого канала мы вынуждены принять зеркальные меры в отношении журналистов московского представительства немецкой медиагруппы АРД. Немецким корреспондентам в ответ на недружественные действия официального Берлина, которые были предприняты в отношении российских корреспондентов, так вот, немецким корреспондентам в качестве зеркальной меры предписано сдать свои аккредитационные удостоверения и покинуть территорию Российской Федерации.
Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin arrived in Kazakhstan on Wednesday for a two-day visit aimed at strengthening ties with the Central Asian nation as tensions escalate over the war in Ukraine. Kazakhstan, a member of the Russian-led CSTO security alliance, has voiced concerns over the nearly three-year conflict. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has notably refrained from endorsing Moscow's actions in Ukraine. In recent months, trade relations between the two countries have strained. Moscow imposed a ban on certain Kazakh agricultural exports shortly after Kazakhstan declined to join the BRICS economic bloc. Putin has championed BRICS as a counterbalance to what he perceives as Western global dominance. Now, with Ireland's election set for Friday, Michael Martin, leader of the outgoing coalition party Fianna Fáil, has described the race as too close to call. Martin, who serves as the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister in the outgoing government, emphasized the need for a stable and decisive administration. He warned against the government that is constantly looking over its shoulders every week, every month. He also took aim at the main opposition party, Sinn Féin, accusing it of policies that could seriously undermine the enterprise economy, and suggesting the party lacks a strong commitment to being positively pro-Europe.
Day or two we campaign very hard. We've a very tough 48 hours ahead of us. It'll be a close fought race. There'll be 43 different elections in different constituencies. Don't forget that. You know, that's in our system at PR. That brings its own results in terms of different personalities and so on. So it's too close to call. And we're going to. So I'm not predicting anything, and I think it would be far too premature to do so. I do believe one of the key objectives or functions of a general election is to enable the creation of a government. And that government must have the capacity to be solid, coherent, and to last 4.5 to 5 years. That will enable good decisions to be made, or at least better decisions than short-term decisions, or decisions taken by a government that's looking over its shoulder every week, every month. We need that kind of strength in the Dáil, and that's the issue that people need to weigh up in terms of.
Now, members of the European Parliament have approved the next European Union Commission, led by Ursula von der Leyen. In a vote held Wednesday in Strasbourg, lawmakers confirmed the new 26-member team with 370 votes in favor, 282 against, and 36 abstentions. Now, support came largely from conservative and centrist parliamentarians, while far-right and leftist groups opposed the appointments. The new commission, led by von der Leyen, will officially take office on December 1. Addressing the parliament, von der Leyen stressed the urgency of tackling critical challenges, including the ongoing war in Ukraine, which she described as raging at Europe's borders. She called for increased defense spending, warning of serious and immediate threats. Other pressing issues for the EU include the conflict in the Middle East, economic tension with China, and the anticipated return of U.S. President-elect Donald Trump to the White House. And that's all the stories tonight on Beyond the Continent. To remember, you can watch News Central live on DSTV channel 422, Star Times channel 274, Avo TV, and of course on YouTube. Many thanks for watching. My name is Mazino Appeal.